Hello and welcome to the Open Book channel. My name is Oli Ander, your designated open book, and this is where I share my journey as an author, talk about the craft of writing, the business of being a content creator, and occasionally review really good books. If you are watching this video sometime in the future, perhaps the period in which I am filming this will no longer resonate so viscerally inside of you. However, if you are watching this video upon its release, it is November of 2024, and a lot has happened. I wanted to give some space on the platform for those wanting to express themselves who are more directly involved, and although we are all affected by major power struggles in the world, I am also in Le Canada and have a great deal of privilege in my disconnect from what's happening in other countries. There is, however, a roaring discourse online in the literary community about whether reading and writing is inherently political, and I wanted to touch on that because although I totally agree, my personal method of consuming books also doesn't apply very well to the capitalism of which we are now irrevocably entwined. The politics of endorsement comes into reading for me in hindsight and never foresight, but I'll get into that in a bit. If you've already heard a lot on this conversation or the going talking points already, feel free to skip to the timestamp in the video timeline where I go further than just recapping recent events. But for those uninitiated, upon the 2024 presidential election in the United States of America and its outcome in the re-election of Trump, allies to and people in the minorities targeted by his campaigns have flocked to the internet to speak up and strongly make their political stances clear, feeling as though they can no longer assume a kinship in morality with the masses. Even if you're not American, like I said, I'm Canadian, we all felt the ripples of the consequences of this election and what it means for how human life is valued everywhere. In response to the uproar in political discourse everywhere on everything, of course there is going to be pushback in various sects, and among the bookish community, specifically on TikTok, the pushback was the argument that reading is just a leisure. People shouldn't have to look too hard into the text of something if they don't want to. That essentially they don't like that everything is turning political and that reading doesn't have to be. A part of me sympathizes with the sentiment that entertainment should not always require deep critical thinking, but this was not the best time to die on that hill when the rights of marginalized voices are being compromised. I personally have a gaming and a horror channel in which I use as outlets to indulge in the guilty pleasures of mindless consumption, but those do not exempt me from the need to critically engage with something when the need presents itself. And that's the crux of the larger debate, whose roots stem back and resonate with other major book talk controversies that we've seen over the last few years. The easiest example I can think of would be the hype and marketing of It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, where there was a violent divide in the book community over it, between original fans of the book who didn't want to sully their enjoyment with the reality that critical readers were demanding of them to admit that it was a depiction of an abusive relationship and not a romance. Personally, I think the people that genuinely deny the need to comprehend a text they read baffles me, but I'd never shame someone for enjoying some genuinely good old fun smut. The issue only lies in media that is actually problematic and is not being treated as such, or being denied as such. The willful ignorance or unwillingness to accept the themes of a book as a means to manufacture one's own understanding of a story so that they can like it better or it's more enjoyable has been a topic of conflict against some of the more outspoken book talkers on that side of the fence for a while. And that mentality has shifted now to incorporate the new electric political landscape. There are so many facets to this topic on whether reading is political that it's overwhelming, if we're being honest, and we're all trying our best to address it from what point of view we can. As I understand it, it is partially about the harm of echo chambers, that if you actively reject reading diversely, you may consequently allow diverse voices to get smothered, and it may breed a lack of empathy or understanding in others that are unlike you. At its core, it's also part of the age-old debate of whether you can separate the content from the creator. That question used to be harder to answer when we were forced to study classics whose authors were of dubious morality but held historic value to the development of literature nonetheless. But now, in a capitalist society, we endorse things with our money. Buying something from an evil company or a controversial author is an act of enabling them, like a type of vote. It isn't easy to always know that, though. The world is vast and complicated, and in the face of the weight of keeping track of everything and trying to be a good person, some people are just giving up, allowing indulgences in things they know are bad because it will make them, as an individual, happier, and that supersedes all others in a world that's burning down. Truly, that's where I think this reading isn't political stances come from, and the pushback on TikTok fighting for objectively poorly written or harmful books is because it feels like too much to them to ask for more, for awareness or more empathy. Of course, there's a line, a point where the harm allowed is too great to justify one's selfishness, but there is a gray area in all this. I don't look up every author before I pick up their books. I barely read the backs of most books before I choose to dive into them because I want to enjoy the adventure of discovery. In that, reading kind of becomes my own microcosm, and I would argue that it minimizes the political aspect of reading. The politics of the writer and their intentions may be present in the work, but if they are not blatantly in the story, their stances on important issues may remain hidden, and it is entirely up to my media literacy, or lack thereof, to understand the implications of the work within the work itself. I don't even read other reviews until I've written my own. But I think in that moment, after consumption, and upon giving a public opinion, that is the moment that things become political. If we all read in our own privacy and kept to local in-person book clubs and accessed books through the public library instead of using our own finances, we could remain far more anonymous. But the fact that we are online is the breaking point. Our consumption is an endorsement. Our word is an endorsement or an opposition. The point being that it is sided, no matter what. The act of discussion, sharing opinions, reforming and reasserting them, or staying silent is political. It's way more than just reading. Facing a time when politics dictate bodily autonomy, our existence is political. And in a capitalist society where spending money on something or someone is essential to survival, like it has to go somewhere, it becomes political what that choice ends up being. It's the choice to go to Starbucks or to go to a local cafe. At this point, it all matters. It is bleak, but it's true that politics is inescapable. Even if a novel is about fictitious situations, every fiction is applicable to some aspect of humanity. And if my preferred means of consuming media blindly creates a case where I've missed something important, or had a bad take, or unknowingly given leverage to a terrible person, it is then my responsibility to address that if I wasn't aware enough to prevent it. I think that's where this conversation leads us, and where it also has to end, lest the responsibility of the world be placed on every individual's shoulders. We must have the allowance for others to make mistakes, and must ourselves have the willingness to fix ours. People should be allowed to enjoy the media they consume, but I think this whole hang-up on whether reading can be apolitical is founded on the desire to not have to justify that enjoyment. Everything in life shouldn't have to be a battle. I truly sympathize with that, and how it feels like that's exactly what the world is turning into. But if you are posting your opinion of said media online, however, you are expected to engage with the ensuing discourse, or at least accept that there will be discourse with or without your participation. Because, I mean, otherwise, what's the point? It's like people promoting generative AI as a great way to skip the entire process of creating something, to which I ask, to what end? Why create anything at all if it's not the goal? And likewise, why share an opinion on something if you don't actually want to talk about it? Reading is the act of relating to a character that doesn't even exist, and if we can't extend that to our fellow human, well, whether you agree that reading is political as I proposed in this video or not, the question doesn't matter nearly as much as our actions. Support what you believe in, promote what you love to read, be what you want to see in the world, Writing is fighting, friends, so if that's all that we can do, type on.